They said money could buy anything in Chicago, but inside the Valente world, power was measured by who could make a room go silent. Charlie had learned that silence well. For 6 months, he had worked as a server at Le Jardin, the kind of restaurant where senators lowered their voices, billionaires pretended not to notice the bodyguards near the exits, and mafia families reserved private tables without ever writing their real names on the books. To the customers, Charlie was just another Omega in a black vest and white shirt. Quiet, polite, forgettable. That was exactly how he wanted it. He kept his head down, his smile controlled, and his pheromones buried under suppressants strong enough to make his blood feel cold. No one needed to know what he really was. No one needed to know why he had chosen this restaurant, this city, and this family. Not yet. Table 7 is yours tonight, the floor manager whispered, his face already pale. The Valentes are coming. Do not upset them. Do not breathe wrong. Do not look directly at them unless they speak first. Charlie adjusted the tray in his hand. I know how to serve a table. You don't understand. Danny Valente is dangerous, but his mother is worse. Charlie's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. He understood better than anyone. At exactly 8 o'clock, the front doors opened. The whole restaurant shifted without anyone officially announcing it. Conversations softened. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the music seemed to sink lower. Danny Valente entered first. He was the alpha heir of the Valente Mafia family, the man everyone called the future king of Chicago. He did not need to raise his voice or show a weapon. His presence alone was enough. He walked through the room like he already owned every breath inside it. Behind him came his guards, and beside him walked his mother, the current shadow queen of the Valente family. She was elegant, cruel, and smiling like she had already chosen who she wanted to hurt tonight. Charlie approached their table with a bottle of sparkling water and 3 crystal glasses. Good evening, he said smoothly. Welcome to Le Jardin. Danny looked up. For one brief second, the room seemed to narrow between them. Most alphas looked at Charlie and saw an Omega server. Danny looked at him like something did not fit. His gaze moved over Charlie's face, then down to his hands, then back to his eyes. Charlie lowered his gaze at the exact moment a servant should. But he had already seen enough. Danny Valente was sharper than the rumors. What is your name? Danny asked. Charlie, sir. Charlie, Danny repeated slowly, as if testing whether the name was real. Before Charlie could respond, Danny's mother cut in. Do not flirt with the help, Danny. It gives them ideas. Charlie kept pouring the water. The woman lifted one glass, barely sipped, then set it down with a disgusted look. Warm, cheap, useless. It was chilled before service, Charlie said politely. I can bring another bottle if you prefer. Her eyes slid to him. Did I ask for an explanation? No, ma'am. Then learn when to stop talking. The manager stiffened near the service station. A few tables nearby pretended not to listen, which meant they were listening very carefully. Charlie took the insult because that was what he had come here to do. Watch, wait, survive long enough to find the opening. Then Danny's mother moved her elbow. The full water glass tipped over. It shattered against the table, sending sparkling water across the white cloth and down the edge of her expensive coat. The restaurant froze. She rose so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You careless little Omega, she hissed. Look what you've done. Charlie did not move. He had not touched the glass. Everyone close enough had seen it. No one would say it. I apologize for the accident, Charlie said evenly. But I did not knock over the glass. The silence became sharper. Danny leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left Charlie. His mother stared as if she had been slapped. Are you calling me a liar? No, Charlie replied. I'm saying the glass fell because you moved your own arm. The manager almost choked. Charlie, apologize. Danny's mother smiled then, and the air changed. Her alpha pheromones rolled across the table like a heavy, invisible hand. It was controlled, deliberate, and cruel. The kind of pressure meant to make an Omega's knees weaken before his mind could resist. Several servers stepped back. One busboy dropped his gaze instantly. Charlie felt it press against his skin, felt his own omega instincts react deep in his body. His suppressants strained under the force, but he locked every muscle in place. He did not kneel. The smile vanished from her face. Danny sat forward slightly. For the first time that night, he looked surprised. His mother's voice dropped. "Get on your knees. Clean the floor. Apologize properly." Charlie looked at the broken glass, then at her coat, then back into her eyes. "No." A soft gasp passed through the room. "I won't kneel for something I didn't do," Charlie continued, his voice calm enough to be terrifying. "And I won't pretend your cruelty is my mistake." Her face twisted with rage. "You filthy little thing." She raised her hand to slap him. Charlie caught her wrist before it reached his face. The movement was so fast that even Danny's guards reacted half a second too late. Charlie held her there, his fingers locked around her wrist, his expression still perfectly calm. "I wouldn't do that," he said quietly. "You might regret touching me." Then he leaned closer, close enough that only she could hear him clearly. His voice changed. The accent disappeared. The server vanished. In its place came an old Sicilian dialect, clean and precise. A language buried under blood and family secrets. He whispered about a night decades ago. A false peace meeting. Poison glass. A man who had not vanished by accident. A family burned so thoroughly that the world believed no one survived. Danny's mother went white. All the arrogance drained from her face in a single breath. She pulled back, trembling now, not from anger but fear. "Who are you?" she whispered. Charlie released her wrist. He smoothed the front of his vest, unpinned his name tag, and placed it on the soaked tablecloth beside the broken glass. "I quit," he said. Then he turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving behind a restaurant full of people too afraid to speak. Danny stood slowly. His mother was still shaking. But Danny was not looking at her. He was watching Charlie disappear through the swinging doors, and something dark, fascinated, and dangerous settled into his eyes. For years, people had lied to Danny Valente. They had bowed, begged, obeyed, and hidden their fear behind loyalty. But that Omega had stood under alpha pressure without bending. That Omega had terrified his mother with one sentence. And that Omega was definitely not named Charlie. Danny turned to one of his guards and spoke in a voice low enough to chill the air. "Find him." His guard nodded. "And if he runs?" Danny's gaze stayed on the kitchen doors. "Then we learn why." Charlie did not go back to the restaurant after that night. By midnight, his employee profile had already disappeared from the system. His locker was empty, and the tiny apartment he rented on the east side of Chicago looked like someone had never truly lived there in the first place. That was intentional. Charlie had spent years surviving by preparing exits before entrances. Fake names, burner phones, emergency cash hidden inside cracked walls and loose floorboards. The moment Danny's mother recognized the old Sicilian dialect, Charlie knew the quiet phase of his revenge was over. Now it was survival again. Rain hammered against the apartment windows while Charlie sat cross-legged on the floor beside his bed, dismantling a compact handgun with calm precision. His suppressants sat beside him on the table, along with a blood-stained napkin from the restaurant and an old silver lighter engraved with the Moretti crest. He stared at the crest for several silent seconds. Then his burner phone vibrated. Unknown number. Charlie ignored it. The phone vibrated again. Then a third time. Finally, he answered without speaking. A deep voice came through the line. "You disappeared quickly." Charlie leaned back slightly against the wall. "Most people would after threatening the Valente matriarch in public. You threatened her in a dead dialect connected to a massacre nobody talks about anymore," Danny replied smoothly. "That takes confidence. It takes memory." A brief silence settled between them. Charlie could almost picture Danny sitting somewhere high above the city in one of those glass towers, watching Chicago like it belonged to him. "Who are you really?" Danny asked. Charlie smiled faintly. "You should ask your mother that. She refuses to speak about it. That should concern you." Danny's voice lowered slightly. "You interest me, Charlie. There are safer hobbies. I'm not interested in safe." Charlie ended the call without another word. The moment the line disconnected, his expression hardened again. Danny was dangerous in a different way than his mother. She ruled through fear and cruelty. Danny watched quietly, analyzed patiently, and that made him harder to predict. Charlie hated unpredictable men, especially alpha men. He finished loading the handgun, then stood and walked toward the kitchen sink to swallow another suppressant tablet. The dosage was higher than normal now. Staying near Danny earlier had affected him more than he wanted to admit. Something about Danny's pheromones slipped under his defenses too easily, stirring instincts Charlie had spent years burying. That alone made Danny a threat. A soft click echoed near the apartment door. Charlie froze instantly. Someone was inside. His eyes shifted toward the entrance without moving his head. The chain lock was still hanging, but slightly loose. Too loose. His pulse slowed instead of rising. Panic got people killed. Charlie quietly placed the glass down beside the sink and reached beneath the counter, gripping the handle of a narrow combat knife taped underneath. Another sound came from the hallway. Breathing. Heavy. Male. Not one person. At least two. Charlie stepped backward casually, pretending not to notice anything. Then he raised his voice just enough to carry through the apartment. "Long night," he muttered aloud. "I need sleep." The attack came immediately. The front door exploded inward and a massive alpha rushed him with enough force to crack the wall behind him. Charlie pivoted sideways at the last second, driving the knife into the attacker's shoulder before slamming his elbow into the man's throat. The alpha staggered backward with a strangled gasp. A second man emerged from the dark hallway holding a suppressed pistol. Charlie grabbed the first attacker and shoved him directly into the line of fire just as the gun discharged with a muffled pop. Blood sprayed across the narrow apartment. Charlie ducked low, grabbed a broken lamp from the side table, and smashed it across the shooter's wrist. The pistol clattered across the floor. The second attacker snarled and lunged forward, releasing aggressive alpha pheromones meant to overwhelm him. Wrong move. Charlie's suppressants were already unstable. The pressure hit him hard, hot and sharp beneath his skin, but instead of weakening him, it ignited something dangerous. His own omega pheromones burst violently into the room. The air changed instantly. Even the attackers reacted. One cursed under his breath. Charlie's pheromones did not feel soft or sweet. They felt cold, addictive, and strangely dangerous, like walking into deep water without realizing how far the bottom dropped. The nearest alpha hesitated for half a second. That hesitation cost him. Charlie slammed the man's head into the kitchen counter hard enough to crack marble. Then a third presence entered the apartment. Fast, controlled, violent. The window beside the fire escape shattered inward as a dark figure crossed the room in seconds and drove a brutal punch directly into the remaining attacker's jaw. The alpha collapsed instantly. Charlie spun, knife raised, and stopped. Danny Valente stood in the middle of the destroyed apartment wearing a dark coat soaked with rainwater and an expression that looked more furious than shocked. For a brief moment neither of them spoke. Danny's gaze swept across. The unconscious men, the blood, the knife in Charlie's hand, then finally Charlie himself. "You fight like someone who expected this," Danny said quietly. Charlie kept the knife raised. "I did." Danny stepped closer, slow and careful, but his eyes darkened slightly as Charlie's pheromones still lingered heavily in the room. Charlie noticed immediately. Danny's control was slipping. Not fully, but enough. The alpha instinct in the room had become suffocating. Danny inhaled once sharply before forcing himself to look away from Charlie's throat. That tiny movement told Charlie everything. He's struggling. And for some reason, that realization affected Charlie more than it should have. Most alphas lost themselves the second an omega lost control of suppressants. Danny was clearly affected, but instead of approaching Charlie, he deliberately increased the distance between them. He was restraining himself. One of the unconscious attackers groaned weakly from the floor. Danny walked over without hesitation and grabbed the man by the collar. "Who sent you?" The attacker laughed through bloodied teeth. "The matriarch wants the omega alive." Danny's expression went cold enough to freeze the room. "Wrong answer." The attacker suddenly screamed as Danny twisted his arm hard enough to dislocate the shoulder instantly. Charlie watched silently. This was the real Danny Valente. Calm. Elegant. Brutal. Not pretending. The attacker finally gasped out the truth. Orders came from the Valente estate. We were told to bring him in tonight. Danny released him with disgust. Then he turned back toward Charlie. You can't stay here anymore. Charlie crossed his arms slowly. That sounds dangerously close to kidnapping. You think I'd need permission? You think I'd come quietly? For the first time since entering the apartment, Danny smiled slightly. And somehow that smile felt more dangerous than violence. Rain continued pouring through the shattered window while silence stretched between them again. Then Charlie suddenly swayed. Just slightly. But Danny noticed immediately. The damaged suppressants. The pheromones. The adrenaline crash. Danny stepped forward instinctively before stopping himself halfway. Charlie looked up at him, breathing uneven now. Don't. Danny's jaw tightened hard. I know. Another painful silence followed. Then Danny removed his coat slowly and draped it over Charlie's shoulders without touching skin. The gesture was strangely gentle. Protective without possessive. I'm taking you somewhere safe, Danny said quietly. Charlie should have refused. Every instinct told him refusing was smarter. But standing there in the middle of blood, broken glass, and the smell of fading suppressants, Charlie realized something terrifying. For the first time in years, being near Danny Valente felt safer than being alone. And that frightened him far more than the assassins ever could. Danny's penthouse sat at the top of Valente Tower like a kingdom suspended above Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights, and every inch of the place radiated controlled luxury. But Charlie noticed something else immediately the moment he stepped inside. Security. Not just cameras and guards. Reinforced doors. Hidden weapons. Blind spots eliminated with military precision. Danny did not live like a billionaire heir. He lived like a man expecting betrayal every day of his life. Charlie stood near the entrance while one of Danny's men quietly removed the unconscious attackers from the SUV downstairs. The adrenaline from the fight was fading now, leaving behind a deep ache beneath his skin. His suppressants had nearly failed completely during the attack, and the unstable pheromones still made his body feel feverish. Danny noticed. Of course he did. You're shaking, Danny said from across the room as he loosened the cuffs of his black shirt. I'm fine. That's the kind of lie people tell right before collapsing. Charlie shot him a flat look. You always this annoying? Usually worse. Danny walked toward the kitchen island and poured a glass of water before placing it on the counter closest to Charlie. Careful not to approach too suddenly. That restraint again. Charlie kept noticing it no matter how much he tried not to. Most alphas would have used this situation differently. An omega with unstable suppressants, isolated, exhausted, and trapped inside an alpha's territory was vulnerable in every possible way. Danny, however, acted like touching Charlie without permission would be crossing a line he refused to step over. That made Charlie more uneasy than aggression would have. Bathrooms down the hall, Danny said. There are spare clothes in the guest room. I'm not staying long. Danny leaned against the counter. 3 men broke into your apartment tonight under my mother's orders. You're staying. Charlie's eyes narrowed slightly. You seem surprisingly calm about your mother trying to abduct someone. Danny's expression hardened immediately. Don't mistake calm for approval. Silence settled between them again. Heavy but not hostile. Rain slid against the glass walls behind Danny while distant traffic glowed far below the tower. Finally Charlie grabbed the water and drank half the glass in one motion. His throat felt dry from suppressants and pheromone overload. Danny watched him quietly. You still haven't answered my question. I don't remember asking one. Who are you? Charlie gave a soft humorless laugh. That answer changes depending on who's asking. I'm asking. That's exactly the problem. Danny studied him for several long seconds before speaking again. The name Charlie belongs to a dead Omega from Ohio. His records are fake enough to fool civilians but not my people. You knew my mother's history. You knew a dialect almost nobody under 50 still speaks. And tonight you fought trained men like you've been doing it your whole life. He stepped closer slowly, dark eyes fixed on Charlie's face. So I'll ask one last time. Who are you really? Charlie looked away first. Not because he felt intimidated. Because suddenly he felt tired. Tired of fake names. Tired of hiding. Tired of surviving inside shadows for so many years that sometimes he forgot what it felt like to exist as a real person. "My name is Charlie," he said quietly. "But it's not the first name I had." Danny stayed silent. Charlie walked toward the massive window overlooking Chicago, crossing his arms tightly. The city lights blurred faintly through the rain outside. "When I was 11 years old," he said slowly, "my family ruled parts of New York. Old money, old blood, old mafia traditions. We weren't saints, but we had power." Danny's expression shifted almost immediately. He already knew where this was going. Charlie continued softly. "The Moretti family." Danny inhaled once. Every mafia heir in America knew that name. The Morettis had disappeared years ago after one violent night that people still whispered about carefully. "I remember fire more than faces now," Charlie admitted quietly. "I remember smoke in the hallways, gunshots downstairs, my mother screaming for someone to run." His voice never broke, but Danny noticed how tightly Charlie's hands had clenched against his arms. "I hid inside a laundry chute while your mother's men slaughtered everyone in that house." The room fell completely silent. Danny looked genuinely shaken for the first time since they met. "My mother told me the Morettis attacked first," he said carefully. Charlie laughed softly, but there was nothing warm in the sound. History always sounds cleaner when murderers tell it. Danny lowered his gaze briefly. Charlie turned toward him fully now, and the coldness in his eyes made him look older than he actually was. "I spent years in orphanages after that. Then underground fight rings. Then training jobs for people who wanted invisible weapons." His jaw tightened slightly. "Eventually I came to Chicago because revenge was the only thing keeping me alive. And my mother was the target." "Yes." Danny accepted the answer with frightening calm. No denial. No outrage. Just quiet understanding. That somehow hurt Charlie more than anger would have. "I should kill you," Charlie said suddenly. "You're still a Valente." Danny nodded once. "You probably should. But I haven't." "Why?" Charlie stared at him for a long moment before answering honestly. "Because you looked disgusted tonight when she tried humiliating me. You didn't enjoy it." Danny looked away briefly toward the windows. "I've spent most of my life cleaning up her cruelty." Something inside Charlie softened slightly at those words, though he hated himself for it. Then pain suddenly twisted sharply through his body. Charlie sucked in a breath and braced himself against the edge of the couch. Danny reacted instantly. "Charlie, I said I'm fine. You're going into heat." Charlie cursed under his breath. The damaged suppressants. The alpha pheromones from the fight. Staying near Danny this long. His body had finally stopped listening to him. Heat hit hard and fast. His skin burned. His pulse accelerated painfully. Every instinct inside him screamed for relief, comfort, scent, closeness. Danny stepped backward immediately instead of forward. That surprised Charlie even through the haze building inside his head. Most alphas would have approached instinctively. Danny increased the distance. "I'll call a doctor," Danny said tightly. "No doctors." Charlie's breathing grew uneven. "No strangers." Danny's jaw flexed hard as Charlie's pheromones thickened throughout the room. The scent wrapped around the penthouse slowly, dangerously addictive now that suppressants were failing completely. Danny visibly struggled. Charlie noticed the exact second Danny's alpha instincts reacted harder. His pupils darkened slightly. His breathing changed. His fingers curled once against his side before forcing stillness again. Yet he still stayed back. "Why are you fighting it?" Charlie whispered weakly. Danny looked genuinely frustrated now. "Because you're vulnerable. And I don't want your first memory of me touching you to feel like coercion." The words hit harder than Charlie expected. For years every alpha in Charlie's life had wanted ownership, obedience, instinctive submission. Danny was the first alpha actively choosing restraint. Charlie's body trembled harder as another wave of heat rolled through him. "Come closer." Danny froze. Charlie looked up slowly, eyes unfocused but honest. "Please." Danny approached carefully this time and sat beside him on the couch, close enough for their shoulders to almost touch but still leaving space. The effect was immediate. Charlie's breathing steadied slightly the moment Danny's scent surrounded him properly. Warm, sharp, dangerous, but underneath it all, strangely calming. Danny handed him a cold towel for his neck. Charlie took it with shaking fingers. "You're really not going to mark me?" Charlie asked quietly. Danny stared at him for several painful seconds before answering. "If I bite you tonight," he said softly, "I'll never know if you actually wanted me to." The honesty in his voice broke through something Charlie had buried for years. Without thinking clearly, Charlie leaned closer. Too close. Their faces hovered inches apart. Danny's hand moved instinctively to Charlie's waist, steadying him gently, and for one dangerous second Charlie almost kissed him. Almost. Then fear crashed through him harder than heat itself. Charlie pulled away abruptly and stood too fast. "I need air." He turned before Danny could see the panic in his eyes. Because falling for Danny Valente felt far more terrifying than revenge ever had. Behind him, Danny remained sitting silently on the couch, staring at the place Charlie had almost kissed him. And for the first time in years, the future king of Chicago realized he was already losing control of his heart. By the end of the week, half of Chicago's underworld was already whispering about Danny Valente's mysterious Omega. Nobody knew where Charlie had come from. Nobody knew why Danny suddenly stopped attending meetings alone. But people noticed the changes immediately. Danny became more aggressive toward rival families, more protective inside his own territory, and far more dangerous whenever someone mentioned the Omega staying inside Valente Tower. That alone was enough to make people nervous. Charlie hated every second of it. "You're staring at the collar like you want to stab it," Danny said from across the penthouse living room. Charlie sat on the couch wearing a fitted black dress shirt Danny's stylist had dropped off earlier that morning. Spread across the glass table in front of him were jewelry cases, tailored outfits, invitation lists, and security reports for the upcoming winter solstice gala. At the center of it all sat the collar. Elegant, black leather lined with silver detailing and a small Valente crest near the clasp. Public alpha claim. Charlie leaned back slowly. "I still think this is ridiculous. It's symbolic. It's possessive." Danny's mouth twitched faintly. "Both can be true." Charlie narrowed his eyes at him. "You're enjoying this more than you should." Danny closed the distance between them, stopping directly in front of the couch. "My mother spent years controlling this city through fear and old traditions. If I walk into the gala beside an Omega, she tried to humiliate and publicly claim you under Valente protection. Every powerful person in Chicago will understand exactly what side I'm taking." Charlie crossed his arms. "And your mother?" Danny's expression darkened slightly. "She'll lose her mind." That part, unfortunately, Charlie believed immediately. The past few days had already escalated beyond what either of them expected. Danny's mother had publicly denied involvement in the apartment attack, but Charlie noticed how security around Valente Tower quietly doubled overnight. Danny trusted almost nobody inside his own family now. And strangely, Charlie had become the center of that war. A soft vibration interrupted the silence. Danny glanced at his phone, then sighed sharply. "Another meeting. You've had 6 already today. Welcome to hostile takeovers." Charlie watched Danny loosen his tie with visible irritation before heading toward the office hallway. Right before disappearing, Danny paused. "You should eat something." Charlie raised an eyebrow. "Was that an order?" Danny looked back at him calmly. That was concern. Then he walked away. Charlie stared after him longer than necessary. That was becoming a problem. The dangerous part wasn't Danny's power anymore. Charlie understood dangerous men. He had survived them his entire life. The dangerous part was how Danny kept slipping through Charlie's defenses in small, unexpected ways. A hand at his back while guiding him through crowded hallways. Quiet cups of coffee appearing beside him during sleepless nights. The way Danny instinctively lowered his pheromones whenever Charlie looked stressed. Felt real. That terrified Charlie more than fake affection ever could. Later that evening, Charlie stood in front of the penthouse mirror, while Danny's stylist adjusted the sleeves of his dark formal suit. The transformation still felt surreal sometimes. A week ago he had been carrying plates through crowded dining rooms pretending not to exist. Now he looked like someone born inside power. The stylist stepped back nervously. Perfect. Charlie looked at himself silently. Dangerous. That was the word Danny used once while watching him adjust cufflinks. Not beautiful. Not delicate. Dangerous. Oddly enough, Charlie preferred it. The penthouse doors opened behind him. Danny entered wearing a black tailored suit that somehow made him look even more intimidating than usual. Several advisors followed behind him discussing security routes and rival family arrivals. But Danny stopped paying attention the second he saw Charlie. The room fell quiet. One advisor awkwardly cleared his throat before wisely leaving with the others. Danny walked closer slowly, his gaze moving over Charlie with dangerous intensity. You look incredible. Charlie tried ignoring the sudden warmth rising beneath his skin. You clean up decently yourself. Danny smirked slightly. High praise. Then his eyes dropped toward the untouched collar still resting on the vanity table. You're still refusing? Charlie picked it up carefully between two fingers. This thing screams ownership issues. It screams survival, Danny corrected softly. The moment you wear that tonight, nobody in Chicago will dare touch you without declaring war on me first. Charlie looked at the collar quietly. That was the problem. He knew Danny was right. Slowly, Charlie turned around and lifted his hair away from his neck. Fine. Put it on. Danny froze for half a second. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Something about voluntarily exposing an Omega's neck to an Alpha carried instinctive intimacy neither of them could ignore. Danny approached carefully from behind. Charlie felt the heat of his body before feeling his hands. The moment Danny fastened the collar around his throat, a low pulse of alpha pheromones wrapped briefly around Charlie's senses. Protective. Possessive. Warm. Charlie's heartbeat stumbled once. Danny's fingers lingered slightly near the clasp before pulling away too quickly, like he no longer trusted himself completely. We should go, Danny said quietly. The Winter Solstice Gala occupied nearly the entire top floor of the Blackthorn Hotel downtown. Politicians, crime families, corporate investors, and corrupt officials filled the massive ballroom beneath glittering chandeliers, while cameras flashed near the entrance. The second Danny and Charlie arrived together, the entire room noticed. Whispers spread immediately. That's him. The Omega from the restaurant? Danny brought him publicly? Charlie kept his expression calm, while Danny guided him down the staircase with one steady hand resting against his lower back. The touch looked casual to outsiders, but Charlie noticed the subtle pressure whenever another alpha got too close. Danny was sent claiming him even without words. You're glaring at everyone, Charlie murmured quietly. They're staring at you. They're curious. They're irritating. Charlie almost laughed. Almost. At the center of the ballroom stood Danny's mother surrounded by allies and socialites dressed in gold and diamonds. The moment she noticed Charlie beside Danny, the smile vanished from her face completely. Good. Danny led Charlie directly toward her. Tension spread through the ballroom fast enough that even the musicians began playing softer. His mother's eyes moved slowly toward the collar around Charlie's neck. You actually did it, she said coldly. Danny answered before Charlie could. Careful. You're speaking to someone under my protection. Her gaze sharpened dangerously. You would humiliate your own blood for this Omega? Charlie smiled faintly. You tried humiliating me first. I'm simply adapting better than expected. Several nearby guests visibly stiffened. Danny's mother stepped closer. Do you really think wearing a collar makes you untouchable? No, Charlie answered smoothly. Danny does. The woman's composure cracked instantly. You manipulative little. She's enough. Danny's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Complete silence followed. For the first time all night, Danny fully released his alpha presence. Not enough to hurt Charlie, but enough to force every other alpha nearby into submission. The atmosphere became suffocating. Danny stood beside Charlie calmly, one hand against Charlie's waist now. He stands beside me by choice, Danny said coldly. Anyone who disrespects him disrespects me. The entire room understood what that meant. Charlie felt Danny's heartbeat steady beneath his hand. Strong, certain, real. And suddenly Charlie realized something dangerous. Danny was no longer pretending. Neither of them were. Hours later, after the ballroom confrontation finally settled into uneasy celebration, Charlie slipped onto one of the private balconies overlooking downtown Chicago. Cold winter air hit his face instantly. For the first time all night, he could breathe. The balcony door opened behind him moments later. Danny stepped outside carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "You disappeared. I needed silence." Danny handed him a glass before leaning against the railing beside him. The city lights reflected softly across the snow beginning to fall outside. For several moments neither of them spoke. Then Charlie finally looked at him. "Why do you keep protecting me?" Danny held his gaze without hesitation this time. "Because somewhere along the way," he said quietly, "I fell in love with you." Charlie's breath caught. No games. No manipulation. Just honesty. Then Danny kissed him. Slow at first, careful enough to give Charlie time to pull away. Charlie didn't. Instead he grabbed Danny's coat and kissed him back harder. Months of fear, anger, attraction, and loneliness collapsing together at once beneath the falling snow and distant city lights. And inside the ballroom behind them, Danny's mother watched through the glass doors with pure hatred burning in her eyes. The fallout from the Winter Solstice Gala hit Chicago like a controlled explosion. By morning, every powerful figure in the city knew 2 things. Danny Valente had publicly chosen an Omega over his own mother, and the future leadership of the Valente Empire was no longer a quiet internal matter. It had become a war. For the first time in years, people inside the organization started choosing sides openly. Some captains stayed loyal to the old matriarch out of fear and habit. Others shifted toward Danny immediately, sensing where power was moving. But what shocked everyone most was Charlie himself. The Omega who had walked into the gala as a rumor left it as a threat. Charlie noticed the stares everywhere now. Guards lowered their eyes when he passed. Advisors became careful with their words around him. Even Danny's inner circle stopped treating him like a temporary distraction. They understood what nobody wanted to admit aloud. Danny Valente loved him. That realization made Charlie more uneasy than victorious. 3 nights after the gala, rain poured against the windows of Valente Tower, while Charlie sat inside Danny's office, reviewing old financial ledgers connected to the Moretti massacre. Stacks of documents covered the massive desk, along with photographs, encrypted files, and decades of hidden transactions Danny had quietly gathered against his mother. Charlie rubbed tiredly at his eyes. She buried everything deeply. Danny stood beside the bar pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. "My father spent years cleaning up her mistakes. Half these records only survived because he hid duplicates." Charlie looked up slightly. "Your father knew?" Danny handed him a glass before sitting beside him on the couch. "I think he suspected what she did, but by then the family was already built on too much blood. Nobody wanted to dig up old graves." Charlie stared quietly at one photograph clipped inside the file. A burned estate, police tape, bodies covered beneath white sheets. His home. Danny noticed his expression immediately. "You don't have to keep looking tonight." "Yes, I do. Charlie. If I stop now," Charlie said softly, "then all those years surviving become meaningless." Danny went silent after that. He understood obsession. He understood revenge. The Valente family had practically raised him on both. But lately, whenever he looked at Charlie, he started realizing something painful. Charlie had spent so many years trying to survive that he no longer knew how to live. That frightened Danny more than enemies ever could. A vibration interrupted the silence. One of Danny's phones lit up across the desk. "Incoming call, council chamber." Danny answered immediately, his expression hardening as he listened. Charlie watched the change happen in real time. "What happened?" he asked quietly after Danny ended the call. "My mother moved first." Danny stood slowly, jaw tight. "2 council captains publicly challenged my authority an hour ago." Charlie rose with him instantly. "She's forcing a loyalty split. She's forcing a bloodbath." For several long seconds Danny simply stared out at the city skyline beyond the windows. The weight on his shoulders suddenly looked heavier than usual tonight. Charlie stepped closer before thinking too much about it. "You don't have to do this alone." Danny looked at him then, and something softer broke briefly through the exhaustion in his eyes. That's becoming a dangerous sentence coming from you. Charlie tried ignoring the warmth in his chest. Don't make it weird. Too late. Despite everything happening around them, Danny still smiled slightly when looking at him. That small expression somehow hurt Charlie more than anger would have, because it felt real. The following night, the Valente Council gathered inside the lower chambers beneath the tower. Old men in expensive suits filled the massive room while armed guards lined the walls like statues. The atmosphere already felt hostile before Danny even entered. Charlie walked beside him wearing black formal clothing with the Valente collar still resting against his throat. Every eye in the room turned toward them immediately. One older alpha scoffed openly. You bring an Omega into council meetings now? Danny didn't even look at the man. Careful. The warning alone silenced half the room. Then Danny's mother entered. For the first time since the gala, Charlie saw her without the polished confidence she normally carried. The fury beneath her composure had started cracking visibly. Her gaze locked onto Charlie instantly. You ruined this family, she said coldly. Danny stepped slightly in front of Charlie before answering. No, you did. The council chamber erupted into arguments immediately afterward. Old accusations surfaced. Hidden betrayals surfaced faster. Danny revealed evidence connected to illegal trafficking routes and financial crimes his mother had buried for years. Then Charlie placed the final file on the table. The room went completely silent. Inside the folder sat evidence tied directly to the Moretti massacre decades ago. Photos, wire records, witness testimonies, and finally an audio recording. Danny's mother went pale the second she heard the first seconds of her younger voice speaking on tape. Nobody in the room spoke after that. One by one, council members stopped defending her. Power shifted visibly. Charlie expected satisfaction, victory, closure. Instead, he felt strangely numb, because after years of revenge fantasies, the reality looked smaller than he imagined. The woman who destroyed his family no longer looked terrifying tonight. She looked old, cornered, pathetic. Danny's mother slowly turned toward Charlie, hatred shaking beneath her voice. You think this gives you peace? Charlie answered honestly. No. For the first time since childhood, he realized revenge had never truly been the thing keeping him alive. It was grief. The council voted before midnight. Danny officially became head of the Valente Empire. His mother was removed from power and taken into federal custody immediately after the meeting ended. As guards dragged her toward the exit, she stared directly at Charlie. This city will destroy you eventually, she whispered. Charlie held her gaze calmly. Maybe. But you won't be here to see it. After she disappeared, the massive chamber slowly emptied until only Charlie and Danny remained alone beneath the dim lights. Silence stretched between them. Then suddenly Charlie laughed quietly. Danny blinked once. What? I spent half my life planning revenge. Charlie rubbed tiredly at his face. And now I just feel exhausted. Danny walked closer carefully. That's because revenge was never going to heal you. Charlie looked away. I don't know how to be anything except angry anymore. The confession came out softer than intended. Danny stared at him for several seconds before slowly lowering himself onto one knee. Charlie froze immediately. What are you doing? Danny looked up at him calmly, dark eyes steady and unguarded in a way Charlie had never seen before. Then Danny tilted his head slightly, exposing the side of his throat to him. The vulnerable position shocked Charlie harder than violence ever could. If you still don't trust alphas, Danny said quietly, then take the power first. Charlie's breathing caught. Danny, I mean it. His voice remained steady. Mark me before I ever mark you. Let this bond belong to both of us equally. Something inside Charlie broke completely at those words. Because nobody had ever willingly given him power before. Not without wanting something in return. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped closer. Danny never moved away. For one long moment Charlie simply stood there staring at the exposed throat of the most dangerous alpha in Chicago. Then slowly, carefully he leaned down and bit him. The bond snapped through both of them instantly. Warmth. Relief. Safety. Danny closed his eyes briefly as Charlie's scent wrapped fully around him for the first time. Not ownership. Not instinct. Love. Charlie pulled back slowly, breathing uneven now. Danny rose immediately and rested his forehead gently against Charlie's. "You're shaking," Danny murmured softly. "So are you." Danny laughed quietly under his breath. For the first time in years, Charlie felt something unfamiliar settle inside his chest. Then Charlie's phone vibrated. Once, twice, 3 times. Charlie frowned and pulled it from his pocket. Unknown number. A single text message appeared across the screen. "You really thought you were the last Moretti alive?" Charlie stared at the message so long that the screen eventually dimmed in his hand. The room around him suddenly felt distant. The council chamber. The empty chairs. The shattered remains of the Valente Empire rebuilding itself around Danny. None of it mattered in that moment because only one thought kept repeating inside Charlie's head. Impossible. Danny noticed the change in his expression immediately. What happened? Charlie slowly handed him the phone. Danny read the message once, then again more carefully. His jaw tightened almost instantly. Unknown number. "You really thought you were the last Moretti alive?" A second message arrived before either of them could speak. "You should have looked harder before burying the past." Charlie felt cold spread slowly beneath his skin. Only a handful of people knew the Moretti bloodline survived at all. Most of them were dead now, which meant whoever sent this message either possessed impossible information or was telling the truth. Danny looked up sharply. "Do you recognize the number?" "No." "Could it be fake?" Charlie swallowed slowly. "Maybe. But whoever sent this knows too much." Another vibration interrupted him. This time it included a photo attachment. Danny opened it first. Charlie watched the color subtly drain from Danny's face. "What is it?" Danny turned the screen toward him silently. Charlie stopped breathing. The photo was old and grainy, probably taken years ago, but there was no mistaking the child standing beside several armed men wearing Valente insignias. Dark eyes. The same family features. The same silver lighter hanging from a chain around his neck. Moretti blood. Underneath the image sat a final message. "They raised me after the massacre. While you learned survival, I learned loyalty." Charlie's knees nearly gave out beneath him. For years he had survived by accepting one brutal truth. Everyone was gone. His family had died screaming inside that burning estate while he alone escaped through smoke and blood. That belief shaped his entire life. Now suddenly the foundation beneath that grief cracked apart. Danny stepped closer instinctively. "Charlie. He's alive," Charlie whispered faintly, unable to pull his eyes away from the screen. Someone else survived. The realization should have made him happy. Instead it terrified him. Because if another Moretti survived under Valente control, then that person had spent years growing up inside the same world Charlie dedicated his life to destroying. And people raised inside monsters rarely came out untouched. Back inside the penthouse later that night, rain pressed softly against the glass windows, while Danny searched through old classified Valente archives on multiple monitors. Charlie sat nearby on the couch, elbows resting against his knees, trying unsuccessfully to slow his thoughts. Everything felt unstable again. Danny finally broke the silence. "I found something." Charlie looked up immediately. Danny's expression had darkened in a way Charlie rarely saw now. Project Janus. The name felt vaguely familiar. Charlie frowned. "What is it?" Danny leaned back in his chair slowly. "An old Valente program my father buried years ago. Most of the files were encrypted, but enough survived." Charlie stood and walked closer to the screens. Medical reports, behavioral conditioning logs, pheromone compatibility studies, children, dozens of children. Charlie's stomach turned. Danny continued quietly. The organization believed the future of Mafia power depended on controlling alpha and omega instincts more efficiently. They experimented with pheromone conditioning, artificial mate manipulation, and psychological imprinting. Charlie stared at one of the files in disbelief. They experimented on kids? Danny nodded once. Children with rare pheromone traits especially. Charlie suddenly understood. His bloodline, the Moretti pheromones. The obsession. Danny noticed the realization hit him. Your family wasn't only targeted because of power or territory, he admitted carefully. The Morettas carried unusually rare Omega genetics. My mother believed those traits could strengthen future heirs. Charlie felt sick. For years he thought the massacre was revenge and greed. Now he realized part of it had been ownership. Control. Selective breeding disguised as mafia politics. What about the survivor? Charlie asked quietly. Danny's eyes shifted back toward the screen. If someone from your family was taken alive as a child, his jaw tightened. Then they were probably raised inside Janus. Silence filled the penthouse after that. Charlie slowly walked toward the massive windows overlooking Chicago while memories twisted violently inside his head. Fire. Smoke. Screaming. Tiny hands slipping from his grasp during the chaos. Faces he barely remembered anymore. A brother. Or maybe a cousin. Someone who survived differently than he did. Someone who might hate him. Danny approached carefully from behind but didn't touch him immediately. He had learned Charlie needed space before comfort sometimes. You're thinking too much, Danny murmured softly. Charlie laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from you. Danny moved closer until their shoulders brushed lightly together. You're not alone in this anymore. Charlie closed his eyes briefly. That sentence still felt unfamiliar. Not alone. For years survival meant isolation. Trust got people killed. Attachment created weaknesses enemies could exploit. Charlie built his entire identity around staying untouchable because grief already taught him what losing people felt like. Then Danny appeared and ruined all of it. Slowly. Patiently. Dangerously. You know what scares me most? Charlie admitted quietly. Danny looked at him. What if he's right? About what? Charlie's voice dropped softer. What if loving you really did make me weak? Danny stared at him for several seconds before answering. Charlie. The version of you that survived alone was strong enough to stay alive. His expression softened slightly. But surviving isn't the same thing as living. The words settled heavily inside Charlie's chest. Danny reached out slowly this time, giving Charlie enough time to pull away if he wanted. Charlie didn't. Danny's hand rested gently against the back of his neck near the collar. Protective. Warm. Real. For years, Danny continued quietly, I thought being an alpha meant controlling everything around me. Fear. Loyalty. Territory. Power. His gaze lowered briefly. Project Janus raised people like weapons, Charlie. Half my life was spent believing instincts mattered more than choice. Charlie turned toward him fully now. Danny gave a faint, humorless smile. Then you showed up at a restaurant and refused to kneel. That finally pulled a small laugh from Charlie. A real one. The tension in the room softened slightly after that. Hours later, the city had gone quiet beneath the storm outside. Charlie sat curled against Danny on the massive penthouse couch while old files about Project Janus remained scattered untouched across the table. For once, neither of them were thinking about war. Charlie had stopped using suppressants entirely 2 days ago. Somehow being near Danny stabilized his pheromones more effectively than medication ever had. Another terrifying vulnerability. Another strange comfort. Danny glanced down at him. You're falling asleep. I'm awake. You said that 10 minutes ago. Charlie made a quiet, annoyed sound and shifted closer anyway. Danny smiled faintly before pulling a blanket over both of them. The intimacy felt almost frightening in its simplicity. No violence. No revenge. No survival. Just warmth. Charlie rested his head lightly against Danny's shoulder while distant thunder echoed beyond the glass walls. What if we're not destined mates? He asked quietly after a long silence. Danny looked down at him immediately. Why would that matter? Because instincts lie sometimes. Danny brushed his fingers gently through Charlie's hair before answering. I don't care about destiny. His voice stayed low and steady. I choose you. Charlie felt his chest ache painfully at those words. Not because they hurt. Because after everything he survived, he still wasn't used to being chosen. The next morning, the entire Chicago underworld woke to headlines announcing Danny Valente officially taking control of the empire. News stations replayed footage of his mother entering federal custody, while politicians scrambled publicly to distance themselves from old Valente connections. And standing beside Danny in every photograph was Charlie. Not hidden. Not running. Not pretending to be invisible anymore. Far away in another city, someone stared silently at one of those photos from behind a dark computer screen. The unknown man smiled slowly while tapping ash from a cigarette beside an old silver lighter engraved with the Moretti crest. Then he whispered quietly to himself, "You still have no idea what's coming next, brother." Charlie finally found love, trust, and a place to call home beside the most dangerous alpha in Chicago, but the past is far from over. A hidden survivor is watching from the shadows, and the next war may destroy everything they built together. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.